Jerry and Charlie riding through the airwaves, bringing you the heat. Come on, pull your mustache. Now get up out your seat. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. They're bringing you all things Mets. Now you're listening to Chase Station.
Today is Tuesday, June 25th. The Mets conclude a very successful road trip, and it's the start of the Subway Series on a random Tuesday in the middle of the week. Kind of strange feeling. I am one of your co-hosts, Jack. Joining me from his lovely hotel room is Jerry. We're not together because I'm feeling a little under the weather. I decided not to trek to the John Boy offices, so Jerry's all alone in New York. Jerry, how you doing?
I am lovely. You caught a case. I don't know if many of our listeners or watchers follow along with the John Boy warehouse stuff. That's kind of the company bread and butter there. But the warehouse is a wonderful place to play some games, but it also gets every single person sick. So if you consume other content from the talking baseball to baseball today, you're hearing the same raspy voice that you're getting from Jolly. Everybody catches what they call the warehouse bug or whatever it is. So
Yeah, warehouse-itis for sure is the term I like to go with. We just did our
there you go.
floorball tournament, so a lot of sweat and germs just incubating in the warehouse. Got me, got Rosie, got Plouffe, but we trudge on because we're soldiers, and also, you can podcast when you're feeling a little bit under the weather. It's not, manual
Yes.
labor. And there's good things to talk about, Jerry, because I was a little bit worried about this road trip. The Mets have been playing great baseball, but there were off days spread in here, weird timing of games, and they had two, decent teams to play against on the road between the Texas Rangers, the defending champions, and the Chicago Cubs, who have been in wildcard contention pretty much all year. And they went and they took both series in pretty impressive fashion. You gotta just love where this team is at right now, hitting wise, pitching wise, as we head towards matchup with the Yanks.
I think you nailed it. This was like a test because the Mets have been playing really well, like you said, and this is the beginning of what's looking to be a group of teams that are scratching and clawing their way back or already fully in. That's kind of where we were, and they played great. Again, they continued that pace. I was sad that they actually did eventually lose. I thought that. Hold on, shout out Athletic Logos for my Grimace shirt.
Hey, nicely done. I gotta make sure I tag him. That shirt is awesome.
Athlete logos here. Let me stand up for the tag here.
The
But it is dope.
Grimettes.
The Grimettes. I was sad when they didn't come back. They actually lost their win streak. I was like, oh, but then they bounced right back. This is the beauty of what this team has done. They show fight. They're just gritty. They could have lost that game where Diaz got thrown out for the sticky stuff, but then Drew Smith and Diekman shut the door. Places where they could find a way to lose, they're finding a way to win, and that's been great. So this was a test of teams that want to win too, that think they're competitive and they're in the same kind of what are we going to do with our season, buyers, sellers, and they kick their butts.
Yeah, I think that sentiment pretty much nails it. They could have lost a handful of these games. This could have been a 2-4 road trip that we talked about and rationalized in a certain way, but instead they picked each other up. I mean, they had some really impressive offensive games. They absolutely beat up on John Gray and Shota Imanaga, two great pitchers respectively.
Great.
And they just basically turned their entire seasons around. Shota entered the game with a 1.89 ERA. He left with a 2.96 ERA. You're talking about a guy that probably, had he not faced the Mets, would have started the All-Star game. Now that's in question. And it's not like the pitching that they're going to face is going to get any easier. They're facing two of the Yankees' best in the upcoming series between Garrett Cole and Luis Gil. But I don't know, man, if I'm an opposing pitcher and I'm seeing this lineup full of consistency and above average numbers across the board, you're seeing Francisco Lindor's best ball of the year. JD Martinez, who we sung praises of the past 2 weeks, cooled down a little bit, still had a home run in the Cubs series, but everybody else has been picking him up, which is what we've been singing the praises of these past few weeks. It's just really cool to see.
Yeah, it is. It's so cool to see guys stepping up. And they like John Grace having an absolute stellar season. I remember watching that game, and he walks off the mound like he just was like, I don't. They just kicked my ass. Like that's what happened. He didn't know what to do. Sometimes that happens where a team's just better. It's good to see the Mets lineup producing against good pitching. It's good to see him producing in general because there was some doubt as to what they were going to look like. And now they're producing against really good pitching. It looks sustainable. So, I mean, again, everything's trending right. The vibes in Mets land, even with Edwin Diaz's looming suspension, will get into it a little bit. But the vibes are still good, I feel. I don't feel like, oh no, the rails have fallen off without Edwin Diaz when we have to let him go.
Yeah, I mean, after the loss in the final game of the Texas series, I did a tweet that was like kind of a grimace send off. I was like, this was such a
Yeah,
fun week, all this stuff. I caught some flack. They were like, no, the grimace era is not over, guys.
it's
It's
not
not done
over.
yet. And they won another series. So I guess it's not done until Grimace says that it's done, and who knows when that'll be. But a big thing we talked about last week, before we get to some of the, looming stuff with Edwin Diaz and stuff like that, we talked about Francisco Alvarez, how his return to the club had some certain impact on everyone's morale and the team's play. And we talked about how, even if he's not hitting, what he provides to this team defensively and as a clubhouse leader is equally as important. And then casually this past week, he posted an OPS of 1,500. He slugged 900 the past 7 games, hit a couple home runs that went a long ways. And that, I think, is an X factor for the Mets going forward. If Francisco Alvarez, listen, man, I didn't expect him to assimilate into the lineup that quickly, that soon, but he looks like he's fully back. That thumb is not bothering him at all. It completely
Yeah.
overshadowed like a terrific week from Brandon Nimmo. He hit 4 home runs this past week. Pete Alonso's catching fire, but he's the main guy I'm thinking of right now. And like the Mets right now have 5 hitters, 6 hitters really, that could all be all stars, and I wouldn't be shocked between Alvarez, Nimmo, Alonso, Lindor, Vientos, and JD Martinez, all with varying sample size. But it's so important going towards this stretch without Edwin Diaz for the next 10 games. We don't know what's going on with Starling Marte. Apparently, he has to rest as well. But when you have 6 of your 9 hitters hitting at an elite level, you can out hit any woes that your pitching staff might undergo.
Yeah. You said for the next 10 days, did he accept his suspension or
Yeah, I
did
think he can still appeal. I'm not sure if there's any word on that
so?
actually.
I think with these days off, he might play this 2 games against the Yankees and then drop it.
I'd be down for that.
I'm just curious. That might be the case, so
Well,
he
yeah,
doesn't have to
because
sit out like 2 weeks.
and if we do a little schedule watch, we did this a little bit last episode too. After the Yankee series is Astros, Nationals, Pirates, Nationals. And that's a stretch where, you obviously don't ever want to lose your closer, but I'd much rather have Edwin Diaz for these next two, when I'm assuming are going to be close games if the Mets do pull out victories, to have him there in the ninth inning.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's the off days, so he doesn't have to sit for extra like length of 2 weeks, that kind of thing. And then of course he's not he's not worried about the schedule per se. He just wants to be out there as quick as possible. So um yeah, I think we might see him in this Yankee series. And then he'll accept it, whatever. Because you can't appeal it. Like you can, but there's no arbiter that's going to be like, yeah, we reverse it because the guy on the field. It's an insane thing. Again, we can get into it later. I think it's already been exhausted.
Yeah.
But yeah, but this is where we are.
I mean, we can do a little, I guess, blanket statement now because it has
Yeah.
been talked about to death the past 2 days. Sunday Night Baseball, Mets play a fundamental great game. They dominate the Cubs the whole run of the way. Luis Severino has his best start of the season. Maybe you can go to the other Cubs start where he was perfect through 8. He loves pitching against the Cubs, so that's what we learned. Um, Vientos hits an absolute nuke. Lindor and Nimmo go back to back. The vibes are high. Here comes Edwin Diaz. And there goes Edwin Diaz. He gets tossed from the game for sticky stuff. They did a close zoom in of his hand. It certainly looked like something was there of some substance. But again, we never find out what it is if it's not sweat and rosin, which Diaz claims it was. He does the same thing every time out. And now we land ourselves in a situation where Edwin Diaz, who had returned for two impressive outings, had restored the feeling of 2022, is now going to have to sit out for a 2 week span and basically reverse all the momentum he had gained back. And it's incredibly frustrating, not only because this is the third time this has happened to a Mets pitcher out of, I think, 7 total suspensions, which is a ludicrous percentage, but also just the lack of clarity. Like we heard from Vic Carapazza, the crew chief of the umpiring, that this was not sweat and rosin. It was noticeably more sticky. But because there's no testing, because the rule is so ambiguous, all the things we said before with our Scherzer episode and our Drew Smith episode, we'll never find out what it was. And that is, I think, the most damning part because there's no accountability for the umpires who go on to make these decisions.
Yeah, it's not even their fault.
No.
It's a system set up like that. Again, fix the baseball. But Edwin Diaz should know better than to whatever he had on his hand. Like
Yeah.
it probably is sunscreen or not sunscreen, rosin, sweat, and then he grabs dirt. I didn't touch dirt when I had rosin because I didn't want, and it defeats the purpose. But he would rub the ball up, and then his hand would probably be normal. They never let him rub the ball up
Yeah.
to it looked terrible. I'll give him that. Very rarely did my hand ever look like that. So regardless of if it's rosin and sweat and dirt, you're giving them a chance. So make an adjustment and whatever you got to do. It's just too ambiguous. You fix the baseball and leave something on the mound for that's all you can touch. So I don't know. You just got to clarify the rules. It's the same thing with like the check swing rule, except this one, I don't think you should get a 10-game suspension. That's the thing. You can toss them. The 10-game suspension seems extreme when it's so open-ended. You're like, this guy, you can use rosin and, I mean, I hate to bring up Trevor Bauer's name,
Sure.
but he proved that if you use just sunscreen and rosin, that the baseball can stick to it. There's varying degrees. The humidity levels change how it feels. Sometimes you put too much and then you have to go to the dirt and it kind of levels it out. Kick him out. You don't have to let him go wash his hand. Kick him out of the game. If it turns out to be obviously like that wasn't obvious, you just there needs to be an in-between.
Yeah.
We're past the point of guys using it to cheat. The spider tack, that is gone, or it should be gone. But if you get caught with an actual substance in your glove, like on your hat where you're going to because it adds stickiness, that's a 10-game suspension. This ambiguous area needs to be like, look, that's stickier than what we think you should be. Get tossed, get rid of the suspension, and we'll call it even. I think that would be fair.
Yeah, I mean, fairness is not really included in this rule because it's kind of just a black and white thing. And I understand that there was action that needed to be taken in 2021
Correct.
because it was absolutely out of control. Offensive numbers were at an all-time low, RPMs were at an all-time high. I totally understand why the rule was implemented. And I feel like I've regurgitated the same conversation every time this has come up. But again, it bears repeating that the ambiguity of the rule is absolutely killer towards pitchers. There's no bias included with any of this, obviously. It's just the fact that there's no accountability needed for any of these ejections. And it's a lot to put on umpires to make that call because they instantly place themselves in the line of fire. And I'm not exonerating Vic Carapazza and the staff or anything like that. But yeah, when you get the close-up of Edwin Diaz's hand, it certainly appears as though there's something going on there. But then why are there instances where other pitchers are allowed to go to the clubhouse and wash their hands? Because there's no formality to the ruling. It's just up to
I
the
agree.
justification of whatever umpire crew is there that day. It's very clear to me that some crew chiefs don't want to deal with this. They don't want the attention that comes with ejecting pitchers for sticky substances, and others have no issue with it whatsoever. They have no problem answering to the media or staking their claim. Vic Carapazza has now ejected 3 pitchers for sticky substances, and he's the one who's done it the most, and he happened to be the crew chief there that night. It's just so frustrating because it's a time and place thing that if it were any other game or any other umpire, this thing might have not happened. And it can affect the course of the Mets season, going towards the next 10 games without their closer who had just stabilized their bullpen.
It has too big of an effect from a single umpire. And again, uh, I'm not blaming the umpires for this rule, but I'm going to throw in some things here. Number one, at least Carapazio didn't say it's the stickiest substance I've ever felt in my
If I
life
heard that again, oh my God. Oh my
because
God.
every single time I was like, hey, at least he just said it wasn't that. He doesn't know that. First of
Yeah.
all, shut your mouth. You're not, a chemist, and you're not, you don't know. It just is stickier than everything you've checked up into that point.
Sure.
It's suspicious. There you go. That would have been sufficient. You don't have to exaggerate things to clarify. There's another thing that the underlying issue that might be here is the gambling stuff,
Yeah.
and the fact that MLB umpires they may be touched once we understand what's going on that sense, but the fact that they can alter a game based on non-factual information is concerning to me with how close baseball's ties are to some of these gambling, companies and issues that are surrounding the game. Um, just do me a favor, get rid of put a middle marker of if you appeal it, you can actually get rid of the suspension. I
Yeah.
know that it's all been A or B. It's been either it's all been your 10 games regardless. I'm not asking Edwin Diaz to not get ejected and to be reinstated completely because he had that whatever I'm going to say because I believe in Edwin Diaz. The amount that he had on his hand looked ridiculous. Do better than that. Don't give
Yeah.
him a chance, and then you'll be fine. But they need to find a middle ground here because 10 games is absurd for nothing that really could affect a team that's every win is going to matter.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree. I like that you brought up the gambling thing because it's a hard thing to ignore. We just had Pat Hoberg get suspended indefinitely for his involvement in that, and he was one of the more respected umpires of the game. I don't know, man. A lot of it seems fishy. Again, it's irresponsible to throw out, any accusation towards someone like Carapaz or anybody else who ejects based on sticky stuff. But it's hard not to be frustrated. And if you're a Mets fan,
Yeah.
your frustration is completely valid because this is the best stretch of baseball we've had this year, and it feels like they're trying to take out a wheel of our go-kart that's in first place.
Ooh, a
But
little Mario Kart, not
little
a.
Mario Kart, come on. We have
I'll
history
take
there,
that. I'll
Jerry.
take
I've seen
that.
you play. I've seen you play. But all of that aside, it put a damper on what was a fantastic week of baseball for the Mets. Bullpen was great. Starting pitching did enough in most games. We had some interesting starts this week too, between, outside of Severino's fantastic start on Sunday, you got a quality start from David Peterson. Sean Manaea had a bizarre outing where he threw 40 pitches in the first inning and then lasted into the sixth. But these guys are doing enough, man. And when your offense is outpouring every game, 5, 6, 7 runs, whatever the number is, that's kind of all the Mets need to do right now. And I know we do it pretty much every episode, but there were new reports this morning about trade deadline speculation from John Harper, who appears on SNY sometimes. And it was specifically about Luis Severino. So I wanted to bring it up.
First
It
of
was
all,
based
I like
good.
Harper's longtime New York beat reporter, very good at his job. He is a respectable man. So I wouldn't take this with a grain of salt. Obviously, it's just speculative,
Of course.
but I respect the hell out of Harper.
Yeah, and I mean that's mainly the reason I'm bringing it up is because,
Yeah.
there's unidentified rival executives who requested to be anonymous, but most are suggesting that David Stearns is not going to go down the road he did a couple years ago when he traded Josh Hader, because of the health of the clubhouse, which when you look at the Mets right now, I think a big reason for their success this past month has been the mojo and the morale of the clubhouse. So, with all that being said, they're a game and a half out of the wild card spot. We have the same discussion of a ton of these teams are in it. Who is going to sell? The seller's market looks robust for whoever is selling. the Mets are in an interesting spot because even if they do stand pat and it is an uneventful deadline, this team has proven that they can beat really good teams. They've beaten the defending world champions. They've been on this hot stretch for a while now. Their record in division has been great. It's just the temptation of selling, I think, can be alluring for this front office who wants to build something more sustainable. But I think the perfect symbolism of this deadline was Luis Severino going out on Sunday Night Baseball on a national stage in that sixth inning jam with the bases loaded and fighting his way through to have one of his best starts of the season. This is a guy that you really cannot let go at this juncture of the season if you are going to push to compete for this wild card spot. And like you said last episode, if you're not going to trade him, why not keep him around? Because it looks like Luis Severino feels at home in a Mets uniform.
That's the only thing that makes sense to me because you got to either trade him, like you can't just hold on to him.
Yeah.
I feel like that is. I agree that they should not trade him. Your team, again, there's a lot of time left to figure out if this falls apart, which it's very capable of falling apart. I don't think it's going to. I think this team is a valid contender here. But if it falls apart, you still have an option. But if you lock them up, that's a good sign.
Yeah.
That's a reassurance on on another level that you're into this team, not just for this year, but for the next couple of years. And then go out and get some other help. I think not doing anything with your best asset, I think would be interesting. I don't know where Stearns and company is going to go. I do think that when they traded Hader, that was a absolutely ridiculous move because you cannot replace Josh Hader. He's irreplaceable, especially with how he was there. This is a different feel. Obviously, he's been our best pitcher. I agree that they shouldn't trade him, but you can justify the replacement process with Senga coming back, with bringing up
Christian Scott.
Christian Scott. You can make these names fill in that spot. I don't think they should, but you could. So it'll be interesting for me. I'm not ruling out that they won't trade him.
I'm not ruling it out either. And that's why I hope something long-term gets done because we talked a lot this offseason about the Mets have to build a rotation from scratch. Going into this offseason, it's pretty much the same thing, man. I mean, Quintana's going to be gone. Severino's going to be a free agent. Sean Manaea has a player option, but if he has a great year, he might just opt out and go back into free agency. Hauser's going to be a free agent. Brooks Raley, who's hurt, he's going to be gone. Adam Ottavino. This is a ton of pitching that the Mets are going to have to find replacement for, and it gets a whole lot easier when you're able to replace things in their rotation. So even with the backup options of Kodai Senga, he threw a live bullpen session, he's trending towards a good direction. I don't know. Everything has been so out there with him this year. I don't know where he's at, but we get an occasional update that makes me go, oh, okay, maybe. And then Mendoza saying Christian Scott might come up during the 17-game stretch without an off day. There are reinforcements there, but Luis Severino, he might be the Mets all-star this year. He might be our representative at the game because the fans, including myself, just fail to get enough votes for guys like Lindor and Alonso to get in there. With Severino, he's got a top 15 ERA in the National League. He's thrown 90 innings this year already. Like, he has been a star for this team on what I originally thought was kind of a crazy contract for him. Now looks like one of the best contracts in baseball. They have a very tough decision lying ahead with someone like Luis Severino.
I agree. Most of it will play out. He's not going to shut the door until the door shuts itself, until the deadline comes and goes. He's got options. I guarantee you he's already been talking to teams in both directions on if he's going to send them. I'm really curious as to if there's been any bit of extension talks. I really am curious because, like you said, Severino looks like he's very comfortable in a Mets uniform. He's very familiar with New York City, obviously being here for the last, over a half decade. I'm interested because right now you could take advantage of a guy on a one-year deal and say, hey, man, do you want some security? We're thinking about trading you. You can use that. And then on the other hand, he can take advantage of a hot streak this guy has a history of injuries,
Yeah.
so this would be a happy medium. It sounds like a perfect time to negotiate with an agent. I am so far removed from being a star where you're going to be like, hey, mid-season, do you want an extension? Never been a part of my world. But I think it would be a really fun thing for the fan base, for the player, for the team. I think it would all be positive. Um, so yeah, it's we're still pure speculation. We are how many weeks out? 5 weeks out
Yeah, I want to say
from
I think it bleeds into August this year, so maybe five to
yeah.
six, but it's getting close. It's around the corner.
Yeah, so we've got about a month of baseball for this Mets team to decide what direction they want to go. I am for one of some of these teams that are in this is here's a question for me.
Hmm.
If you're on the border of contending, go get a guy now, and if it falls apart, you can trade him before the deadline.
Oh, GM Jerry Blevins with an
That's what
interesting
I'm saying.
call.
Be the
Yeah.
first, go in, make some moves, and then you still have 5 weeks to figure it out. And if the team falls apart, you can offload them to a team that really does need it and maybe get the same thing back or something different. Go do something. This has been
Well,
boring.
the cool thing about the Mets scenario right now is that the last thing they need to trade for is bats. They got plenty of those, and I don't think they're going to be replacing, someone like McNeil. I think the lineup that they have is the lineup that they have. The one thing they need right now is bullpen because Diaz is going to be gone for 10 games. We don't know what's going on with True Smith. He looked like his arm was tight and then he got pulled from the save opportunity. A little bit of concern there. They've been quiet. But I mean, bullpen is probably the easiest thing you can trade for, even if you want to do it early. So I'm sure that's on the mind of the Mets front office there. With Severino, I'm glad you brought up the injury thing. Did you know that if he throws 13 more innings, which I guess would be if he makes two more starts this year, it's his most innings pitched since 2018 when he was 24 years old. He's 30 years old now. So it's either he's figured something out conditioning wise, or is this an anomaly? Like, this is the questions that have to be weighed and answered when you think about the long-term plan or the trading plan of Luis Severino. But I like the idea of acting early because I think the Mets are going to need a little bit of reinforcements. I like where the bullpen's at. Guys like Danny Young getting an opportunity, Dedniel Nunez, sure. But to have someone established back there, I think would be very valuable.
I'm interested to see what they do because who do you move? You can't move anyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, like unless you that would be a hard guy to send out. You're going to need a huge name. Like you're going to need a legit back of the bullpen type name. Who's even on that list? Who are the top bullpen arms available?
I mean,
Like,
I just looked at the White Sox, or excuse me, the Marlins and the Rockies, and I winced a little bit, so no one there.
hmm,
I'm
yeah.
checking the White Sox now. I mean, there are
I mean,
names
Kopech is out
here.
there, but I wouldn't. Kopech is a wild card, man. He's got great
Yeah,
stuff, but I like where the bullpen is now. You can get depth pieces, but I wouldn't shake up the major league roster because you got guys that are reliable right now.
yeah,
Maybe not the same as their ceilings aren't as high as a Michael Kopech or something like that. But these guys give you reliability. Going in, outside of Diekman's been the one that where they had Drew Smith. They've
yeah.
been the kind of volatile relievers that give you nightmares or they dominate and you're like, this guy's nasty. Outside of that, everybody's been pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's hard to argue, and it's interesting because the team that we're going to play these next 2 days, they've been making moves. They went out and they got Tim Hill, the lefty reliever, and they just
Mm.
traded for old friend JD Davis to fill in a spot in their lineup. So JD Davis's first game as a Yankee is going to be against the Mets, which I think is pretty neat. Going to be an interesting homecoming for him. This matchup is kind of weird, man. Like going into the Subway Series, the air kind of doesn't feel right for it. I mean, I've said this in past years. I hate the separate 2 game sets because it always just feels like, two splits are just a
I'm with
given.
you. Play
Yeah.
them back to back.
Why not?
Play
They did that, I think, 1 or 2 years, and it was awesome. They
it
never
was
did it again.
I was a part of some of that. So cool because like it's 4 straight games. You get to build that rivalry a little bit. You feel the tension in the city for like a whole week. It's awesome. I understand that it's easier to do this for scheduling purposes, but it's too big of an event to chop up like this, and it sucks for the like. Just I don't know. It's just not as fun, and it's an event that the Subway Series is awesome for players too. So this is a big deal. Put them all together, man.
Yeah. I mean, you get a nice little homestand for your players, which is cool. I know the idea of this is like, oh, we can get a sellout on a weekday, so just make it the whole freaking week, man. Get yourself four sellouts there. Make it a real series because right now it just doesn't feel that way. And I'm sure like once the games are on and like they're happening, the investment will come with that. But it just feels like kind of a bummer. And I was a little bit bummed that Severino got pushed up to pitch on Sunday. Obviously, he pitched great, but to see Sevy take on the Yankees would have been a very cool moment.
I
Instead,
think
we
it's a
got
smart move.
it's definitely a smart move, and that's why I'm a fan and not a manager.
Yeah.
And that's why we'll have two lefties going up against the Yankees, which I do think is the right move because they've been a little susceptible to left-handed pitching this year. And Peterson looked great in Texas. Sean Manaea pulled it together in Texas. These are two of the more reliable cogs of the rotation right now. Not to say that Jose Quintana didn't pitch great this week either. His last two starts have been terrific.
They've been beyond terrific. He's been like a top 10 the last two guys. Like that's you always know that a guy like that can right the ship. It looked horrible. I was like, oh
Yeah.
shit, right in the ship. Like he was already overturned and he flipped that thing right back and hopped back in. Looks really good. Looks reliable once again. Um, you gotta like where the Mets are, regardless of Diaz being out. You feel like they can hold it together for this stretch of games. This is going to be a fun series. I know the Subway Series is always fun. So, are you going to any of these? Oh, no, no, no. You're not going to any
I
of
am
these
not
games.
going. Well, I checked ticket prices for tonight just in case, and it was like $200 to sit in the 500s. Um,
Ew.
no, yeah, so that's not happening. But tomorrow I'm going on vacation, so I'll be watching 6 hours up north in Maine. But I will be watching because I wouldn't miss the Subway Series for the world. And the Yankees, I think we're catching them at an interesting time.
Um,
They're 3-7 in their last 10. They've lost three or four straight series, I want to say. They're playing, no offense, their worst baseball of the year. They got beat by the Red Sox, the Dodgers, the Orioles, and now the Braves. So we're catching them at a pretty interesting time in their season, a time of flux. They just lost Stanton. They don't have Dominguez. Judge was injured as well. So it's an interesting spot to be a New York baseball fan because if you told me a month ago that the Mets would be somewhat favored in this series, I would have laughed in your face because the Yankees were on top of the world and the Mets were at the bottom of the world, which would be the South Pole, Antarctica, whatever you want to call it. Now we're 2 games out from 500. Two wins here brings us back to the brink where I never thought we'd get to again. And I really like the way the Mets lineup is going. And I really think we're going to get some fireworks in these 2 games.
I agree. I mean, we're catching Garrett Cole, who's his second start back. We're getting Luis Heel, who's has been over the whole season been kind of electric as a rookie. He's gotten beat up, I think, just recently.
Yeah, his last start.
Yeah, but it feels close to even. If we had Edwin Diaz in the back of the bullpen,
Sure.
depending on where he goes, obviously Judge and Soto are the two best hitters on the planet right
Going to
now
be
that
fun to
are
watch.
healthy. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how they navigate um, that part of the lineup. Stanton's on the IL now, so that makes it a little bit easier to pitch around possibly. But yeah, man, this is a fun time. Always a fun game. A couple of games. I'm excited to be back in the studio with pre and
Yeah.
post. So
Big
we'll
day for
be
you.
doing that.
Pretty
So I'm
cool.
excited.
Yeah, Mets are winners of 9 of their last 12 since London. They still have not lost a series in the Grimace era. Best record of any team in June at 13-6. Pretty cool.
I think it's cool. So this to me, so these two games, I'm going to lump into one series between 2 and 2. So it's a 4 game set.
Yeah.
So but we've had some pretty special performances in recent memory against this Yankee series. We've had obviously the 3 homer game from Lindor. Do you
Yep.
see anybody? Is there anybody out there? I'm putting you on the
Ooh.
spot here. Are you seeing a special performance from anybody? Are you calling for something? Do you want to see specifically one player kind of shine?
Love this question. I have two names, and they're both because of quotes, so I'm cheating a little bit. One is JD Martinez, who does not care about the Subway Series. His quote, I think, with Mike Puma was awesome. He was just like, just tell me who's pitching and what I need to
He
know.
doesn't give a shit.
Such a
That's what I
professional.
love about him. It's legitimately
Absolute.
every at bat is the same, regardless of who,
Yes.
what, when, where, and why.
I don't give a shit as long as I can get a hit in the at bat. That's him. That's what I love. The other, who I think might be playing a little bit of an emotional series, Harrison Bader, who I think deep down was hoping to return to the Yankees, was happy to stay in New York on our 1 year deal, is having a great year. I think he might have a little bit of a chip on his shoulder. The Yankees need outfield help. He might have been the guy to fill that void. Now he plays for the Mets. He's having a nice year. I think you might get some fireworks from him this series. Maybe it's a nice play. Maybe it's another one of those doubles down the line, but I really like his brand of baseball right now.
I like that. And if it's a clutch situation, he's going to come up. I have
Oh,
two
yeah,
names.
obvious. Okay.
Uh, I want one of the young guys or both of the young guys to step up. I want to see a big moment from Mark Vientos, like a signature moment. We
Mm,
haven't really had one.
that's
And
true.
Francisco Alvarez, continue this. This guy will shine brighter, and then nothing's brighter in New York City and in baseball right now than the Subway Series, in my humble opinion. I'd love to see one of those two guys just throw the team on their back in a Judge type way or a Soto type way. Just be like, look, I'm going to go 4 for 6 with 3 home runs in these 2 games, and like hop on board.
Sounds easy enough, you know? Um, I love that answer. And I can't believe we almost forgot to mention. I know it was a while ago at this point because it was, I think, the second game of the Texas series. Alvarez, I think, had the best at bat of the season against David
Ooh,
Robertson. That inning was electric. I think there was
it
like
was.
four different 8 pitch at bats versus Robertson, who the week before struck out Otani, Freeman, and Betts 1, 2, 3 on back-to-back nights. He's pitching some of his best baseball ever. And in that 6-2 comeback win in game two, Alvarez's at bat against Robertson was so disciplined, so impressive to watch. That 2 run double that tied the game. I love everything about what's going on with this kid right now. So I think I'm kind of with you on that pick. I think he's going to have a special
Yeah,
couple
man.
days.
I want to highlight that at bat too, because we talked about him looking lost
Yeah,
at times and chasing. David Robertson, especially right now, his stuff is so sharp right now. He hasn't lost anything on his velocity. Obviously, from his peak, he has, but over
sure.
his last successful few years, this guy's got nasty stuff, unpredictable at bats too, because he'll throw a few different pitches. That was eye opening to see Alvarez lock in to an at bat and not be fooled and look foolish, even in like one swing. He looked great. It was a key moment for me in that, huge comeback, obviously, but to see him evolve a little bit, I hope he can keep it. And I don't know if it's maturity because he's like still 16 years old in the big leagues for his third year. Um, but if he can find consistency with that kind of JD Martinez, I don't care who it is, what it is, I'm going to bring a professional at bat. If that starts to loop into his repertoire, look out. The sky's the ceiling for this kid.
The influence of JD Martinez seems to be just everywhere on this team. I think it's going to go down as one of the most important signings of the year. 5 games at home for the Mets against the Yankees and the Astros, and then an 8 game bender on the road versus the Nats and the Pirates. We'll probably come back to you guys next Tuesday to recap these events. Hopefully, another successful homestand for the Mets, who've been playing better ball recently, better record at home recently. I kind of don't want the month of June to end, Jerry, which is a sentence I've never said before as a Mets fan.
Yeah, it's not been a historically great for your recent Mets, but it is. It's fun right now, so I hope they continue it straight into July. Finish strong here. It should be fun. So enjoy the Subway Series. You enjoy Maine, my Maine
Thank you,
man.
sir. Oh, I like that.
You a much earned little vacation here for you, and I'll be texting you.
You better be. Good luck on SNY pre and post. I'm sure it's going to go awesome.
Thank you,
And
and
to
good
all our
job
Mets
on
fans.
Mets off day live for
Oh, thank
SNY.
you so much. Appreciate it. That
Good
was a lot
job.
of fun to
I'll
do.
be I'll be filling in for you on Thursday. I'll be doing that.
Oh,
So
nice. Perfect. All right, guys, enjoy this week in Mets baseball. We'll see you next week, and let's go Mets.
Let's go, Mets.
Shea Station, Jerry and Charlie. Shea Station, Jerry and Charlie. Thank you all for coming. Hope you enjoyed the show. We will see you next time, where we'll be back.
Shea Station.